Greene Street Joinery and the American Craftsman podcast are proud to partner with Montana Brand Tools. Montana Brand Tools are manufactured by Rocky Mountain Twist in Montana, USA. With numerous patents dating back to the invention of the hex shank system by our founders, we strive to produce accessories that add precision, flexibility, and efficiency to your toolkit. In addition to woodworking tools, we produce many high-quality cutting tools that are used by the aerospace, medical, automotive, and industrial markets. Our end product has a fit and finish that is beyond comparison. Montana Brand Tools are guaranteed for life to be free of defects in material and workmanship because we build these tools with pride and determination. For 10% off your order, visit montanabrandtools.com and use the coupon code American Craftsman. All right, you ready?
I'm ready, I guess.
You guys ready? Ready for season 2, episode 1 of the American Craftsman podcast?
Yeah, we got a whole new thing going.
Yeah, completely new.
So, I hope it goes well.
Yeah, me too. Who knows what will go wrong, because something is inevitably going to go wrong.
Yeah, so we're going to go through American furniture design.
Yeah, so for the next year, we're going to be talking about the 12 periods of American furniture.
Yeah.
Starting today with the early American period and then going all the way to, contemporary design. So what's going on right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, this one's going to sound a little bit like sixth grade social studies class.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of lay the foundation, the who's and the where's and all that stuff because, that's always important to know where we came from.
Yeah. I mean, we learned a lot just doing the research for this first set of episodes. So, I mean, you see, this is just one of 4 packets that we have for today.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You might notice the look of the podcast is a little bit different. We're messing around with cameras and camera settings and putting a little thing in the background, trying to make it look a little bit nicer. We're going to definitely be incorporating more visual aids into the podcast because, it's furniture. It's visual. You need to see what we're talking about. So urge you to check out the podcast on YouTube. Urge you to join the Patreon because we're going to be giving the patrons all of this information with all of the source material. So you'll be able to go back and use these, in your own education and be able to, see where we got the information and do some research. Do your own research. That's a 2021.
I mean, we spent many hours digging this stuff up.
It was pretty exhausting. So
yeah, computer work is harder than woodwork.
Yeah, and especially we're going back to we're talking 1600s, 1700s, 1600s.
Yeah.
So like you have to really sift through a lot of stuff to get the good information.
Yeah,
not like today the information is infinite.
Right. You have to cross check everything, make sure you're getting the same story in a couple of places, and use reputable sources.
Mm-hmm. And you may, as you listen, you may notice. So, like today, we're sitting down. We're going to film all 4 episodes for this.
Yeah.
Early American period. So that's sort of the new format. If we talk and it seems disjointed, like you're like, oh yeah, this week you guys, like when you listen to episode 4, that's going to be a month from now. So just to fill you in, so you
I'm gonna shoot Jeopardy style. They do the whole week in one day.
Oh, do they really?
Like that. I know they do multiple shows. They might film in 2 days or something.
Yeah. Huh. That makes sense because returning for the 10th week is Ken Jennings. Like this guy, what did he take off of work for 2 months?
The guy on there now is closing in on $1 million.
Wow.
He's won, I just saw last night, 24, 26 shows, something like that.
Wow. You need to start bumping those numbers up. That's like chump change for a game show these days, $1 million.
It gets a little boring, though, when it's the same guy always winning.
Yeah. Nerd.
Yeah. Somebody needs to throw him a beating.
Well, let's not waste any time. We're going to get into this. So we sort of split these up. So Rob is going to be the leader of the pack on this one.
Yeah.
And we'll sort of switch on and off.
So, as Jeff said, we're going early American today. That's the beginning of American furniture. And when did this happen? We're looking at 1640 to about 1700 when it starts to grow into the next phase, which I think was colonial.
Yeah, and 1640 is really just the beginning of the colonization of the United States, so it makes sense.
So this is, those of us who are listening from here in the States, we know or should know most of these things. But we do have listeners in Australia and in Europe and stuff like that. That's right, we're big in Slovenia.
Yeah.
So what's going on in the 1600s, the mid 1600s? Is there's a migration to what becomes the colonies on the east coast of America. And we're talking about the states that would become Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, New Jersey, where we are right here, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, North and South Carolina, and Georgia.
You just confused the hell out of me because you went out of order to what you have written down here.
Yeah, I substituted Maryland and Massachusetts to begin with, and then I just started freewheeling it.
I would have got so lost if I was trying to do
that. We should preface this by saying, in between being a chef and a woodworker, I was a history teacher. Yeah. So some of this was kind of old hat to me, even though I taught high school. We did go over this stuff. American history was split into 2 terms in high school, as we all remember. So we're basically looking at the Atlantic coast, and all the action is happening in the North Atlantic coast.
Yep.
As far as furniture, even though you have Jamestown and important colonies that are happening, like in Virginia, Maryland, and the Carolinas.
Roanoke.
Roanoke. They're importing still. They're bringing a lot of their stuff over from England, primarily.
I think it was pretty sparsely populated down there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Even in the Northeast and the New England area was the hot spot. Even that was sparsely populated.
Right. You have Boston and Philadelphia, I think, are the 2 main cities that start to populate. And that's where most of the furniture creating started to develop.
Right.
My notes tell me here that the craft is really growing in and around Boston, Salem, and Charleston. These 3 cities in the Boston area, Massachusetts. We got 20 joiners, 30 turners in the mid 1600s.
Wow.
So you are talking just a handful of people.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the difference between a joiner and a turner. And then as you're closing in on the end of the century, we're looking at about 60 furniture makers.
Wow. The Handicrafts Guild.
Yeah.
So that was like I guess, a modern or the modern version of that would be like the Woodworkers Guild or something like that.
Yeah, they had a system back then for passing the craft on, which it'd be great if we had something like that today.
Yeah.
And that's something we'll probably do as we're going through this and we're finding our ways. We're going to compare and contrast.
Oh yeah,
what we're doing today and how this period has definitely affected us. We can draw a straight line through it. So we're setting up when and where, and so now why furniture, and we kind of take it for granted nowadays, don't we?
Yeah. Well, maybe we don't. Well, even we do, but
in our home and stuff.
The layperson really takes it for granted.
Right. Like think about when you move your first time out of the house. You take a couple of hand-me-downs with you, right? Your parents give you a dresser. You take your old bed with you.
Yep. Old kitchen table that was in the garage.
Right.
It's all beat up.
So that's kind of what's going on as people are getting on a boat and coming over to the colonies. And they're taking a few things with them, and we'll get into that. But why did they start building furniture? Mostly out of necessity here in the Americas.
Right.
People didn't come with much. Yeah, really, like, if you're going to get on a boat and start out in a new place, new world, chances are things aren't, you're not some of the upper crust.
Yeah, typically that's not the case.
Yeah.
Especially these first people who came.
Right.
You'll see in the future, getting probably closer to the 1700s when people with money and power they see opportunity in the new world to leverage that money and power even more. Right.
Once the grunt work has been done in the colony.
Yeah, the noble person isn't coming here when it hasn't been settled.
Yeah. So as I was getting back into my role of history teacher, I wrote down, why did furniture develop an independent form in the Americas?
Mm-hmm.
And market demands was one of the things, and we don't really think about it that way, but it's kind of like today. Like, how many times do we get a request for a quote and it looks just like the last request for a quote?
All the time. Basically all of them.
So, it's market demands.
Yep.
Even as people are just setting out on a new life, there's still market demands. They're just a little bit different. Nowadays, it's mostly what's the hot trend and how much money do people have to spend.
Right.
And so there's market demands like that in the colonies. People need certain things. There's only a few people that can make them.
Mm-hmm.
We need stools. We'll make those ourselves.
Right.
We need something to sit on. We need a table. We might be able to hire somebody out to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to develop an independent form in the Americas because also there's distance from Europe. Initially everything's influenced by where they came from.
Right.
But, with the scarcity of skilled labor, even the tools to make these things, the European designs kind of get pared down, simplified a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you think you have, even at the height, 60 furniture makers, let's say you have 90 wood turners if you're scaling that up from 20 and 30 equally. That's for the entire colonial United States. That's 13 colonies with, there's got to be a couple thousand people per colony at this point.
Yeah.
So, talking under 200 people to create all the furniture for these thousands of people.
Right. A lot of the stuff was done by farmers, and
it's the vernacular furniture.
Yeah.
Which you can see here, Anarchist Design Book, great book about vernacular furniture. He doesn't touch really on the early American period, more the European kind of stuff, but it all ties into this.
So, we're looking at why stuff developed in Americas differently, and as life gains permanence, people get a little bit more prosperous. They want nicer things. And it's not much different from today. Trends begin. People with certain skill sets start churning out furniture, becomes popular, and we'll get into all those guys. I had no idea they went back that far.
Yeah.
And people wanted to show off.
Yeah.
It's just like today.
When you first get here and you have to build something to live in, and you're fighting off, wild animals and and being attacked by the natives who are like, what the hell are you doing here? You're not worried about making like a really nice piece of furniture.
Right. So I found out that a lot of the early guys migrated, all the early like furniture makers migrated over from shipbuilding.
Mm-hmm.
They all came over. That was the trade. But the economy of being a shipbuilder wasn't really working out. The ships had to be moving back and forth. They needed less shipbuilders.
It was more of a one-way trip here.
Right.
And then the ship went back to get more people.
They needed home builders.
Yeah.
So these guys started building homes. They used their joinery skills into putting homes together. And, you can follow the next step into them, opening up a shop and becoming a furniture maker. So this one really reminded me of like grade school. So who's coming over here? We're going to probably mention the Great Migration a couple of times. 1600s, the Puritans, the Pilgrims, they're slightly different groups. They both had problems with the Catholic Church, so they're Protestants, and about 21,000 Pilgrims and Puritans come over to the colonies, and you're one of them.
Yeah.
16 million descendants from that small group.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So right off the bat, you got to look at how they're going to influence how this furniture design develops.
Right.
It's like everything else. And the Puritans were super religious. And another thing was they were probably the most literate group in maybe the whole world at the time. As a community, as a consolidated community, reading and interpreting the Bible was so important to them. And because they had problems with the church, they wanted to be able to do it independently.
Yeah, which is like the complete opposite of the way most sects of religion work, because they wanted just the upper crust of the hierarchy of the church to be able to disseminate the information in the Bible to the people, as a form of control, basically.
Exactly.
Say, no. Well, we're gonna tell you what this says.
Explain it to you.
Yeah.
It's like having a kid. It's very paternalistic.
Right.
Yeah. Here's something I didn't know. They started Harvard.
Wow.
And apparently only 6 years after that first community started.
Wow.
So that's one of the legacies. And this is some of the things that, being a Puritan, that was kind of like an epithet. That was like a derogatory name that their detractors gave them.
Wow.
I didn't know that either.
Me neither.
And they really weren't. So my notes here say they were not dour killjoys. Now,
so let's dumb that down for the people.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Educator. They were really religious. They the Bible kind of was the big factor in their lives and in a community, but they didn't all wear black. They loved color. They loved decorative objects, and they weren't afraid of showing off a little bit of their, let's say, newfound wealth or how they were doing. So they were good customers, really. They were educated. They liked nice things, and they were prosperous because here's something we probably all heard: the Puritan work ethic, right? Self-reliance, political localism. Those are all things that they left us. So they're good customers for furniture to be built.
Yeah, we got to find
some Puritans.
And So it was the Puritan. It was all Puritans here, basically, in the beginning.
Yeah. They really weren't in the trades. Although, you know, you can't make a blanket statement like that. But for the most part, so they were consumers of these things. But they were the bulk of the customers, because the rest of the guys that come over are mostly like, they're not families like the Puritans. Now, you have a family group, you have a community, you're going to need all the furnishings for a home. If you're a guy that's coming over because he thinks, you know, the streets are paved with gold,
not yet.
You're not so inclined to, you know, settle in, buy furniture. And permanence is part of what builds the need for furniture, which drives design and all this other stuff. So who made the furniture in the colonies? We went over this just briefly. The shipbuilders turned to home builders, turned to furniture builders, and then, of course, there's the guys that come over who are the super skilled craftsmen. I mean, when we started doing this research, we were kind of thinking, well, everything's going to be really rudimentary. You know, you're going to have like turnstools with pegs driven in and like, you know, really roughshod kind of things. And then as we were looking through the museum pieces, there's really, really gorgeous, exquisite work that was made at this time period, mid-1600s, that we probably would have a hard time replicating today. I mean, only the most skilled people could do it. So back then, if you were considered a skilled craftsman, you could build your house and you could furnish it.
You can't get people to change a light bulb these days.
You had to be good at math. You had to know your history of design, which, you know, back then it was a lot of classical stuff, you know, the Greeks and all. And we lean on that today. I mean, the golden ratio and all that stuff.
Time tested.
Yeah. You had to know about wood, from the tree. I mean, you went out and cut a tree down. And then you had to dry it. You had to split it. You know, you had to do all these things. We think we're, you know, starting from the beginning because we get our rough sawn. We have to joint and plane it.
If there were, you know, 60 furniture makers, how many sawyers were there? 2, 5, 10?
Yeah. All this stuff is interconnected. So you had to know about math. You had to know about angles, proportion, you know, trees, understanding wood and its qualities, its movements, finishes. And you had to be able to run a business. As we know, that's not simple. And the basic elements are still the same. I mean, we have to be the chief cook and bottle washer. And so imagine being a guy in, you know, colonial America doing our job, but having to do so many more steps in the process, worried about putting food on the table in a completely different sense.
I mean, you know, you had to do everything back then. You know, he had to go out and hunt for your food, and you know, there was no supermarket in 1650. No,
and you had to go into the forest, choose a tree based on its, you know, its growing patterns, its age, its size, fell it, all with the idea that in a few years' time, this tree will be ready to make something from it. I mean, talk about the planning.
And I guess there must have been, you know, some greenwood woodworking in the beginning, because there was no time to wait.
No.
You know.
That's where all the turning comes from. So all the skilled guys they were direct immigrants from Europe, mostly Britain.
Yep.
And they came over and they did their best to bring their trade with them. If they were fortunate enough to be able to bring all their tools. But chances are, it's like, the guy who leaves is probably not the best guy in town. If you have this well-established business, are you going to leave it to get on a boat to go to this completely, unknown, this crapshoot of a place they're calling America?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a Puritan, probably not.
Right, right.
Because they're facing persecution.
Right. So there's a handful of guys that come over that know what they're doing, and they're making all those pieces that we see in the museums today. Because there are a few. There's still a few pieces around.
Yeah, the Met seems to have quite a bit.
Yeah. So, and on the other end of the spectrum, you got the local guys, the farmers, the settlers themselves. They're making all those rudimentary pieces that we kind of thought of.
Yeah, there's still guys like that. That's our competition. Drawing some parallels here to the present day.
Yeah, we could take a minute to kind of, instead of just going on, we could take a few minutes to talk about how a lot of these things are still, contemporary issues or scenarios.
Yeah.
You have a limited number of skilled people working to build things for a limited audience. Most people are kind of doing the handyman, Home Depot, get it cheap kind of thing.
Yeah.
So not much has changed, has it?
No. Unfortunately not.
So we're building a background of like who and where and what. We haven't really touched onto any of the design elements yet, but we'll get there. Back then, you had two kinds of woodworkers, I'll call them, furniture makers. You had your joiners and you had your turners. Joiners, and we're Greene Street Joinery.
Yep.
A lot of people don't get that sort of nomenclature. The joiners were the people who, took a couple of straight pieces of wood. Well, they had to make them straight first.
Yeah.
And create joinery, like such as a mortise and tenon, things like that, and join them together. That took more skill. The turners, and I guess this is where the greenwood furniture comes in. They were turning furniture. A lot of stools were made that way. 3 or 4 round legs, drill a couple of holes in a blank of wood, and then pin it at the top with like a wedge. So they were churning those things out. It took less skill, and I guess there was more material available for those guys.
Yeah.
It was a lot faster to produce something like that. And as we know, time is money.
Yeah.
So those things were bought up too. It took less skill to make it, and you could sell it for a lot less money. We're going to get into some folks of note, but there were a couple of guys that popped up as some of the earliest cabinet makers of note that came over from England. There was William Searle and Thomas Dennis. Now, these guys came over in the 1660s, and they came from Devonshire, England. So they brought that's a great word that you used, the vernacular style of Devon to Massachusetts. And that was a big factor in the initial starting point, in the starting point of like this early American design,
right?
Because it influenced everybody. Searle, I find out, he dies right away.
He didn't make it long.
He's here. And Dennis marries his widow.
That bastard.
So Dennis was not really an apprentice or anything like that of Searle's. He was a contemporary, a peer.
Right.
And in fact, as research goes on and on, it's hard to decipher whose work was whose. Mm-hmm. But Dennis was an expert carver and joiner, and his stuff is starting to get a little bit of its own renown, I'll call it. That might be too big of a word, but he's separated himself from Searle a bit. Mm-hmm. And the other guy I'll mention, who came out even earlier in 1636, he opened a shop. This guy was John Simons, and he had 2 sons, and the 2 sons had 3 apprentices.
Well, that's very early too.
Right.
You know, Mayflower's what, 1620?
Right, exactly. So that's why I wanted to bring this guy up, because this is how you see the trade starting. Mm-hmm. This is how it happened. I got a little bit of information here on The Apprentice, not the TV show. And we know a little bit about this because we've tried in vain to bring people in.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear any listener who's had some experience with this. Mm-hmm. We know that what's his real name out in Australia is serving as an apprentice?
Jack Thornton?
Yeah, Jack Thornton. Beaver Badger? Is that Beaver Badger?
No, that's Colin. He's Jack Thornton 98.
Jack Thornton 98. Yeah. So these apprentices would start at about the age of 14, if you could imagine that.
That's a full-grown man in the 1600s. You got about 14 years left before you die.
They started you at 14 because they figured you were done at 21. They wanted you for 7 years, and it says here that they usually didn't make it the full 7. Maybe it was the shorter lifespan. Maybe it was the need for more people to, fill these roles. Yep. Once you had 4 or 5 years under your belt, you felt like you could move to another town, take your skill set with you, salud, and get going. So it get this. It wasn't uncommon for a master to charge parents or an apprentice a fee. Boy, wouldn't we love that?
Yeah, it would make it a possibility.
Yeah, because, we've run into this just trying to hire help. It costs us money to have somebody help in the shop.
Yeah.
And margins are so tight, as anybody who's running a small business like ours knows.
Yeah.
We can't afford to train somebody. And you really can't afford to pay a skilled person either. That's why you're kind of like owner-operator.
Yeah.
Because we put in the hours that we couldn't afford to pay somebody for.
No. We couldn't get somebody to work for what we pay ourselves.
We won't go hourly rate.
Yeah. And then, you factor in all the taxes and stuff like that, insurance liability. Goes through the roof, the price.
I found that if you were an orphan, a lot of times if you were lucky enough, you'd wind up in an apprenticeship program, but you had to pay. So that probably got worked out after you finished.
Yeah.
Because you had nothing. You came in with nothing.
Like indentured servitude kind of.
Yeah. So if we had an apprentice, we would be providing them with room and board. So maybe
a little cot in the shop.
Yeah, we could do that.
If you're interested,
and
shoot us an email.
And then it's kind of like getting out of prison here, because at the end, you got a little bit of money and your tools. like in the movies when the guys get out of prison, they get the new suit and everything. That's so you work for 7 years. Here you go, Joe.
Have at it.
And occasionally they got a little stipend the last few years as they were getting more skilled. And the apprenticeship was a legal contract.
Yeah.
The the apprentice agreed to keep our secrets, our trade secrets. And if the apprentice wanted to go out or do anything like that, they had to ask us. They had a promise to, stay out of trouble, no carousing,
Oh my God.
stay out of. In those days, it was the tavern. Stay out of the tavern, don't get into any trouble, and you agree to work without pay for the term of the contract.
Wow.
And on the other side, it listed what we would be giving to the apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
We would provide a basic education as well as, teaching them woodworking skills, how to read, write, do math, because as we know, without being able to do all those things as well, we really can't run a business.
Right.
And that's what the apprentice is really going to do. Once he leaves the master, he's going to put his own shingle out.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to know how to read. He's got to know how to write. He's got to be able to present to a client.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be able to do math, keep books, let alone how to, use math for building furniture.
Uh-huh.
And if you were good, you got a set of clothes. We'd be handing out a Calavera apron, wouldn't we?
Ooh, well, it depends on how good you are.
Yeah, well, after 7 years.
Well, you better, yeah. If you last that long.
It's funny because I had Christopher working for me for about 7 years, but it wasn't full time. He'd come in after school and sweep up and things like that. But I can see the progression because at first he was just cleaning.
Right.
And then gradually I'd leave piles of stuff for him to sand, and I'd have to, instruct them, initially. And then it got to be a great thing where, like, let's say you had a bunch of shelves or drawer boxes, you need the edges broken. You just leave a note and you go, break the edges on all this stuff, and you come in the morning and like magic, it's done.
Yeah, shop elves.
Yeah. The shop was clean. It was a great time. And I just listed a couple of, basic tools. We're going to get more into this in like the third episode. But it was curious, some of the tools that the cabinet maker had, for measuring. Basically, they use story poles, story sticks for everything.
Wow.
And they would save them up on the walls and things like that because, let's say, I had a cabinet built and it needed repair or something like that. That's where all their notes were kept.
Yeah, and things were kind of standardized. I have a book back there about door making, and that's how, everything is laid out off of story poles.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Saws.
I'm gonna put a flame under your ass because we're only 2 pages in and we're 40 we're around 40 minutes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you got about 4 pages left.
All right, let's speed it up. Let's pick up the tempo. So, I wanted to mention those things just to briefly, compare and contrast today. Everything was done by hand. The smoothing planes, the shaping planes, the turning with lathes, that's pretty much the same.
Yep.
Hide glues, and everything. Imagine drilling holes by hand.
Yeah.
I mean,
a lot less. Granted, they're doing a lot less. We're drilling and putting in screws all over the place, and they were relying on hand-cut joinery more. But yeah, especially the guys who did turning, all those staked pieces of furniture, you got to drill all those holes.
Yeah. So, so we got, when, where, why, who. The guys had, although there were some skilled cabinet makers, mostly a bunch of rookies,
right?
And things were in short supply in the colonies, and so as better tools emerged, better availability of tools, furniture got better. So let's get into the design of early tools. Early furniture. The chest was really the most popular and important piece of furniture.
Yeah, it was a lot of what people brought over too.
Right.
Was just a chest.
And is, its simplest form is a box.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you can, just like today, we can take that box and we can make it as ornate as we, are capable of or paid to do. The chest turns into, the high boy, the low boy,
mm-hmm.
and what we would call a chest of drawers now. And the other piece of furniture that I found was pretty important in the development of design and furniture making business was the cane chair. Now, it was important for a different reason. Now, the cane chair, these guys figured out, hey, if we pool our talents,
mm-hmm.
if the turner turns the front legs and the joiner creates the joinery on the back legs and the seat, and the caner, the guy who does the weaving of the seat, he does his thing, the finisher will finish it.
Mm-hmm.
We can make these chairs and not only sell them locally, we can sell them to all the other people in the colonies.
Right.
So this
production style.
Right. That's why the cane chair was considered an important development.
Mm-hmm.
Not because it was so stylistically important, but because of the mindset it created. So let's get into the two major types of furniture design. This is what everybody's been waiting for. Shut up, Rob. What was the design? It was all based on, and I'm going to let you say it so I don't mess it up.
Jacobean?
Jacobean. That's right. That's James the First. Jacobean is Latin for King James the First. He ruled from 1603 to 1625. And the Carolean, which was for Charles II, 1660 to 1685 was his reign. And in the middle, you had Oliver Cromwell, who was a Puritan.
Yep.
So what's Jacobean design? Really blocky, rectilinear, heavy proportions, and
somebody's calling you.
Yeah. Oh, it's Chapel Hill Dentistry.
Rob goes to the dentist more times in a year than I think most people go in a decade.
Yeah, that's I had to cancel my cleaning appointment. They're not taking my insurance.
Ugh.
I had to find a new dentist. Now they want to know why.
Can't you just come in? We'll charge you full price. No big deal.
So, Jacobean? Jacobean design. So it's heavy. If it's decorated, it's got a lot of scroll work, carvings, and if you saw a picture of it, you'd recognize it immediately. Maybe not by name,
right?
But you'd see it. It'd look like an old church chair or a chair that a king would sit in.
Yeah,
really heavy in that sense. And the Carolean design is sort of more flamboyant. What happens is James is I don't know how his reign ended, but Oliver Cromwell, the Puritan, took over, and he was like trying to simplify everything, and design followed suit because this is the way things happen. Socioeconomic conditions can dictate these things. So Charles II comes back into power, and he was in exile in France. So he's influenced by the more florid designs and things like that. So all this stuff is trickling down to the American colonies. People, if they brought something with them, chances are it was Jacobean.
Yep. Jacobean. We'll get it by episode 4.
And as the colonies are starting to prosper, people are staying put, they're in need of furniture, in want of furniture.
Right.
Now this new design from Europe. And let's face it, that's where, if you were considered stylish, you were looking to Europe for your design cues.
Yeah, and that's where everybody was from. It's,
right.
Not like today where you could be from England and about what the hot trend is in China. Well, it wasn't, the information didn't flow as fluidly back then.
No. And so then these designs are sort of Americanized.
Mm-hmm.
They become a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
For portability's sake.
Right.
A little bit simpler in design. That could be due to the fact that there are less skilled people making them, so they're doing their best at mimicking. It's like if we were going to make a green and green piece,
mm-hmm.
we would do our damnedest.
Right.
But we would look at it at the end and go, we're not green.
No, yeah, we're not the Whole Brothers.
Yeah. We'd try, but, we would probably go, they're not paying us to do this
mm-hmm.
amount of detail. So some of that was necessitated by cost. Greater flexibility in design. People needed to be able to use something for more than one thing at times in the colonies.
Yep.
And this became known as pilgrim design. So you got your basis in Jacobean design. Cromwell's puritanical influence is there in the middle. The Carolean design comes in towards the end of this early American period, and it's all mashed together and becomes pilgrim design.
Wow.
So I'll summarize and say that the early American furniture design was influenced by circumstances, environment, necessity, ties to the old world, and finally a growing prosperity. You could see how those things are really evident in what we do today.
Yeah.
People's circumstances, the environment, and then their necessity, ties to, instead of the old world, you could put ties to Instagram, Pinterest, this, what's happening out there in, the world.
Yeah, I mean, those are really the foundations of good design.
Right. And growing prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope we were able to lay the groundwork and not become too tedious.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. What do you think of that? I mean, what are your impressions?
I mean, I'm really still digesting all the information from our own research.
I know, it's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. And we're just scratching the surface.
And we could see the pace has to be picked up.
Well, no, I mean, we're sitting in about right where we want to be.
All right.
The biggest surprise to me is, how quickly they went from the sort of necessity type vernacular furniture to more ornate things. Like you're talking about a decade or two, and things are really picking up to be, more designed more for appearance.
That's a great point because it happened fast, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, talking by 1660, things are really shifting towards a more ornate piece of furniture.
People want stuff to look good. They want to show off a little bit. They want, hey, man, look what I got over here.
Yeah, and 1620 is the Mayflower, but you really don't see a large migration starting until like the late 1630s and 1640s. So
right, I think were the Pilgrims first, and then the Puritans followed. I think so.
The Pilgrims were Puritans.
Yeah, the one group wanted to separate from the church.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that in the next episode. We're going to talk about the Great Puritan Migration. Yeah, the first.
Stay tuned.
The first were the Separatists.
The Separatists were first.
Because they were the non-Separatists wanted to not separate, but then, as we'll find out, they really didn't have a choice.
No. it's funny. My impressions were that there's so much that is the same.
Mm-hmm.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, as the saying goes, right?
Talking 350 years ago.
Right. Like the things that drive our business, and we're a design-driven business.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're working for a designer or we're designing ourselves, that's really our niche. If people want something off the shelf,
they go get it off the shelf.
Right. They can find that cheaply, inexpensively. They come to us because they need something different. They want something different.
Mm-hmm.
They want something nicer,
right?
Possibly more ornate. It's all the same things that drove the early furniture makers' business and their design.
Yeah.
I mean, we're building on what came before, just like they had their early influences.
Yeah, and this goes, this didn't start with early America. I mean, This goes back from the beginning. We're talking a millennia ago.
We just had to pick a starting point.
Well, yeah, and it's the American Craftsman podcast, so we're doing maybe we'll get into Europeans next season.
You know what else surprised me? That early Americans the first and colonial is the second.
Yeah. Yeah, because, they weren't really colonies right at the beginning, I guess.
Right. I would have thought the names would be switched around.
It wasn't until like England started getting re-involved with these people that I guess they became more quote unquote colonies.
Yeah, and you know what else is curious? New England is still kind of the center, like the North Bennett School. If you want to learn classical furniture building, that's where you go, up to that area.
Yeah. It's the birthplace of America.
So all these things, it seems like it's a long, long time ago, but all this stuff you could see the thread.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
It was a great learning experience.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll see maybe the format and the episode structure maybe evolve a little bit as we go.
Yeah, we're trying to find our feet here.
Yeah, as usual, we just fly by the seat of our pants. So, next episode, we're gonna get into a person of interest.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Sorry to interrupt you, but
it's a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, we hope you liked the new format, the new sort of subject matter. And like I said, check out the podcast on YouTube. Check out the Patreon. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you feel so inclined.
Yeah, it's going to be important to get some feedback as we're trying to shift and, our presentation methods and all these other things, because we're fluid.
Oh, yeah.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah. Well, we hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next week for Season 2, Episode 2 of the American Craftsman Podcast.
Take care.